Hello, lovely people. It's your host, MommaFoxFire, and welcome back to another episode of Even Tacos Fall Apart, the podcast where we embrace the messiness of life and explore topics that truly matter. Today, we've got something special in store for you, a conversation that is close to my heart, one that is all about resilience, personal growth, and the power of words. Before we dive in, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever grappled with fear and anxiety, those relentless companions that seem to lurk in the shadows when you least expect them? Well, you're not alone if you answered yes. In fact, today's episode is all about understanding and conquering those fears. Our guest today, Stan Popovich, is not only an expert in this field, but he's also someone who's walked the path of anxiety and emerged stronger. Stan is the author of the book, A Layman's Guide to Managing Fear, and he's here to share his journey, his insights, and his wisdom on dealing with these often overwhelming emotions. Now, you might be wondering, what does writing a book have to do with managing fear and anxiety? Well, as Stan will tell us, it can be a powerful form of therapy, a way to confront those inner demons and find your own path to healing. So whether you're someone who has faced the relentless grip of anxiety, or you're just curious about the transformative power of writing, this episode is for you. Stan's story is not only relatable, but also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. We'll be diving deep into the importance of seeking help, the significance of self-care, and the surprising ways in which writing can be therapeutic. I promise you by the end of this episode, you'll have some valuable tools to add to your emotional toolbox. Enough for me, let's get to it. Grab your favorite cup of tea or a glass of wine, find a cozy spot, and join me in this enlightening conversation with Stan on Even Tacos Fall Apart. Okay, JK, we're going to start over here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Mental Health Monday. I'm really excited tonight to be talking with Stan Popovich. We're going to be talking about managing fear and anxiety and also about his experience writing a book, which is really cool. And I think that it's going to be a wonderful conversation. So a little bit about Stan before we get started here. Stan Popovich is the author of the popular Managing Fear book, A Layman's Guide to Managing Fear. He has over 20 years experience in dealing with fear and anxiety and wrote a book that focuses on everyday techniques a person can use to manage their mental health issues. Stan's expertise has been featured in the national news media and has been published in various national publications. I have lots of socials and information, website, all of that. If you're interested in his book, you can go to his website and there are some links there. Bite Mark, hey, how are you? Brian, hey, how are you? Y'all know the drill. If you have a question, there is a question queue open for Stan, exclamation point Q, follow it with your question, and that'll put it into a question queue that we will make sure to address while we're here live. So if you have any questions about managing fear or anxiety, or even about writing a book, feel free to pop them into the chat, and we'll make sure to get to them. So Stan, while we are getting going here, just tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you enjoy doing outside of writing and running your blog?
Well, I work a lot with my website, managingfear.com, where I write a lot of articles on how to deal with anxiety and fear, and then I submit them to different websites, magazines, and different media outlets, and they publish my articles. I offer a lot of free advice on my website, managingfear.com, where I offer a lot of articles and blogs for people who can't afford to buy my book, where they can get free advice on how to help with their struggles so that they don't have to deal with what I had to go through my 20 years of experience in dealing with fear and anxiety.
That's great. Is there anything that you do? Do you have any hobbies outside of that? Or does that just take up all your time?
Sports. I like soccer, running a lot. I like to lift weights. I like to read a lot and like to go out and spend time with my friends doing social events.
Oh, that's awesome.
Such as concerts and various other sporting venues.
Yeah, get those social connections. That's really important. We do have one community question already, and that is from Bite Mark, and she asks, what is your favorite poem?
Poem?
Mm-hmm.
I like all kinds. I like Hemingway. He's my favorite.
Yeah, there's some good Hemingway poems. And also, you know, I know that there's lots of good Hemingway writing and everything, right?
Mhm.
There's also a really cool tool that if anyone is a writer or you write for work or you do any copywriting or anything like that, there's an online app. It's called Hemingway Editor. And I don't know the actual website, but it's Hemingway Editor. And it's fantastic. It'll give you like a score for your writing and everything. It's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Mhm.
I use it a lot for work, honestly. Any particular Hemingway poems that you enjoy?
Not
Just
particularly.
anything. Yeah, that's great.
Yes.
That's awesome. Do you have a favorite podcast or a book that you think that everyone should read?
Well, in terms of the book, I like various self-help books, like The Feel Good by David Burns. That's a good book.
Mm-hmm.
Anything mental health related, I like a lot because that's where I continue learning different skills and improving my mental health. And any other self-help books are kind of interesting too.
Yeah. I was just this weekend, well, I guess it was Friday, we were talking about books and fiction versus nonfiction and all of that. And I tend to not read a lot of nonfiction just because I can't get through it. It takes me so long to process through it. And after a day of like working and doing all of this stuff, it's so hard to get through a good nonfiction book. But I eat fiction. Like I read so many books every year. It's great. But if you are interested in Feeling Good, The New Mood Therapy by David Burns, I just put a Goodreads link. Buy it wherever you want. It doesn't matter to me where you buy it, but good recommendation. Yes. Appreciate that for sure. When did you begin experiencing fear and anxiety, and what are the differences for you between fear and anxiety?
Well, I started with fear and anxiety when I was a kid. But when, like the 1980s, during that time, mental health wasn't really a big common thing. And when I started going to Penn State in 1990, that's when my fear and anxiety really got bad. Mm-hmm. And that's when I started seeing more counselors. And that's when I realized that I was diagnosed with anxiety issues, and that was something I was going to deal with the rest of my life. So I was motivated to talk to different people and do a lot of reading and doing a lot of research and trying to find techniques that I could apply in my own life so I could get through each day. Mm-hmm. Over the years, my notes grew, and in 2003, I published my notes into a small book called A Layman's Guide to Managing Fear, where I can where I offer a lot of advice on how to deal with anxiety and fear and some of the things that I went through. And it basically goes over techniques on what you can do when certain situations happen dealing with anxiety. And then a year later, I created my website. And then since I have so much advice to offer, in addition to my book, I started writing a lot of articles, and I posted them in my blog and article section on my website, so that when people go there, a lot of them don't have money, and a lot of them are struggling just like I did. And so when they go, the point for them to go, when they go to my website, the key is for them to get help right away, and by getting free advice, which can help and save in expensive counseling, and you can get immediate relief right away. And then my book adds more value into those articles. And also in terms of fear and anxiety, fear to me, well, since I was diagnosed with those issues in my life, everything was scary, like basically what's going to happen in the future and the what if scenarios and things like that. And that eventually caused a lot of stress and anxiety, and eventually caused a vicious cycle of worry and fear in my life. And at first I had a hard time dealing with that cycle, but then through my experiences and talking with different people, I found different ways to get out of that cycle of worry and fear, which can consume people and interfere with other people's lives.
Oh, that's great. So I think a lot of people, if they didn't experience fear and anxiety in high school, college is where it starts to come in for a lot of people, because all of a sudden you have all of these responsibilities and all of these expectations, and you have to do things on your own. Before you had, and my 16-year-old and I have talked about this a lot, like mom is not always going to be there to remind you, to ask you what your grades are, what do you have due this week, those kinds of things. So we're practicing kind of that self-management now, but a lot of people don't do that before they head off to college. So I would not be surprised to learn that many, many people experience fear and anxiety for the first time in college. I think that's got to be
there's
common.
A lot of people in high school also experience that too. So a lot of high school students and everything. And so I tried to focus on dealing with people from young and old, because they all deal with mental health issues at different ages and different situations and things like that. So I try to focus from people from young to old.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, my 16-year-old is in therapy for anxiety. And so, but then my 9-year-old, like, I feel like he has no anxiety in the whole world ever. I know that he does. But, it's not to the level that he needs to seek treatment for it. So, so a lot of people do struggle with managing fear and anxiety in their daily lives. What are some of the practical strategies or techniques, whether they're in your book or not in your book, that people can employ to cope with those emotions when they arise?
Well, the first thing is to know that you have a problem. When you start having problems getting through each day, you get stressed out, you feel irritable, not having too much of interest, you're moody, depressed. It's probably a sign you're struggling with fear and anxiety. The next step is probably to talk to your primary care physician and try to get some advice saying this is the symptoms. And your primary care physician will tell you, well, it's probably mental health related. And in those situations, the next step is probably is a good idea to get some help, talk to a counselor who can give you advice and give you like a pathway to start in dealing with your fears and anxieties. And then once you start talking to a counselor, it's also very important to apply those techniques into your life so that you can start seeing improvements into your life, because it's not going to happen right away where you apply a technique in your life and it automatically works. It's going to take some time and it takes some work. So the earlier you started, the less suffering you will experience. And in terms of techniques, there's all kind of techniques. One of the things I do is I try to organize my time. I try to pace myself. I try not to do everything all at once, which can stress me out. I try not to focus too much on the future, which is a lot easier said than done. I try to take it one day at a time and not worry about what may happen in the future. Self-visualization techniques, like if something is something that you're going to experience in a day or two that's going to stress you out, like giving a speech or performing in a sporting game or whatever, it's important to maybe run those situations in your mind mentally so that when the time comes, you'll be ready for it. I do a lot of exercises, talking to different people, trying to stay active. And a lot of that stuff's on my website for more information on different techniques that are available. And the key is what makes me different is that there's no one or two techniques that works for everybody. There's all kind of variety of techniques. Some people use spirituality. Some people use counseling. Everybody's different. And so I try to give people a lot of variety and options so that people can pick and choose which techniques work for them. You can also talk with your counselor on those issues. But from my experiences, whenever I talked to a counselor, they only gave me like a few techniques. And when they didn't work, then I was kind of out of luck. So that motivated me to do a lot of research. And I save a lot of people a lot of time and money and suffering, because what I do is I incorporate all those techniques into one easy-to-read book.
I love that. Yeah. And I'm really glad to hear you say, like, there's no one thing that's going to help everyone, because that is so true. What works for you might not work for me. I'm not a highly religious person. So it might not be something that I want to approach the same way that you approach. And it might not be that something that I want to approach the same way that my sister approaches. Like, every single person is unique. And also, like, what you're struggling with is highly dependent on your life experience, right? So
yes.
So it's completely different. Was there ever a time where you tried something that a counselor gave to you and you were like, oh man, this works really well, but I wish I just went a little bit further? Did you ever experience anything like that?
Well, a lot of times when they gave me techniques, they only worked a little bit because my fear and anxiety was more intense. And that's what motivated me to go on my own and do some more research, because, I mean, the counselors were helpful and it was good to talk to people and all that, but it didn't really get rid of my anxieties, unfortunately. And as a result, I had a hard time. And so I realized, I told myself that, I'm going to have to make more of an effort to try to find what's available. And so I did a lot of the research. And I would apply these techniques in my life. And so sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't. I kept a notebook, like I said, of what worked and what didn't work over the years. And over time, I got better. I was fortunate enough to have counseling, and it was helpful. But a combination of that and doing a lot of research kind of really helped me out.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I'm a researcher as well. Whenever I have something either coming up or that I'm struggling with or that I'm dealing with, I start Googling, which Sometimes my therapist gets on to me about like, Google does not have all of the answers.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you see something on Google and it is not accurate. so
Yes.
yeah, I mean, but you have to kind of know how to look things up and how to research and all of that. But yeah, I mean, 488, you're exactly right. A notebook of helpful, not helpful techniques is really smart. That is, it's really cool to kind of, because then, you know, if it's 5 years later and a therapist says, well, have you tried XYZ? And you're like, oh, actually, I don't remember if I've tried that. You can kind of look back and see, right? At what, see what you've done and what you haven't done.
Yes.
That's really cool. Is there ever a time where the methods and techniques in your book would not be recommended for someone?
Well, most of the techniques that I try to use in my life would be good for everybody. It just didn't work for me. I try to stay away from those things that don't work or that maybe make things worse. So I always try to make sure that the techniques that I use and I advise on my website and articles are proven. And just to make that clarify, I also had my book reviewed by different counselors before it got published.
Oh,
So
that's cool.
I didn't have techniques in there that I just threw out of thin air and put in my book. My book was reviewed by different counselors and professionals before it was published, and I have a lot of book reviews on my website on the book review section where I have many reviews from different counselors saying how my book can help their clients and everything. So everything is legit, and everything I've included actually works and scientifically based, result oriented.
That's really cool. So, I mean, were these counselors that you already knew? Were they folks you had
They were in the
found on the
Pittsburgh
internet?
area.
Okay, cool.
Pittsburgh area and the Penn State area. The one thing I don't talk about is medications. Medications is very helpful, but since I am a layman, I didn't want to get involved in talking medications because I didn't want to get into trouble because I'm not a doctor.
Yes.
In terms of medications, they can be useful, and when I bring that topic up, I advise that you talk to your primary care doctor and your psychologist and counselor in terms of medications because counseling with a little bit of medication can go a long way. It's a combination of two. Now, a lot of doctors just say, well, just pop some pills in and then you'll be okay. And that's not the way to do it. You got to watch for doctors and counselors who just say, well, just take all this medicine and not do anything. So it's really important to have a doctor you trust and a counselor. And if they're pushing medicines to you, high dosages and many medicines, you might want to get a second or third opinion because it's a combination of medicines and counseling. There is no magic formula, and you just have to be careful in who you talk to and make sure that they're reputable.
Yeah, that's really important too, is to make sure that who you're talking to, first of all, is taking the whole picture into account, right? Especially if it's like things that you have tried or haven't tried, and they're not just trying to throw you into medicine. Medicine is the answer sometimes. 100%, absolutely yes. But if you have already tried some things and they didn't work, they might be able to put you in a different direction. Or if you've already tried a medication in the past, you got to make sure you have somebody who's listening to you, for sure. How can someone who doesn't struggle with fear or anxiety, at least on a regular basis, be a supportive friend or family member to someone who does struggle with fear and anxiety?
That's a big problem because a lot of people who are struggling with fear and anxiety have trouble finding people who can relate to them. That happens a lot in families. And for those people that don't understand what your relatives are going through, imagine a situation where you're walking down the street and someone scares you and you jump. That feeling at that instant is what a lot of your relatives and people who are struggling with anxiety feel. Anxious, confused, scared, frightened. Their thoughts aren't really recommend is number one, don't argue with them. Try to see things from their point of view. Don't try to get into arguments. If you don't understand, try to learn their situation. Read some books. Talk to your doctor. Maybe go to a counseling session with your loved one. A counselor will be able to work with you to help you understand. Go next time someone you love goes to a counseling session, go with them and try to understand the situation, because a lot of people say, well, it's in your mind or just get over it. And it doesn't work like that.
Right.
And mental health is mental illness is a medical issue, depression, anxiety. And just like with physical health, with cancer or heart attack, it's not something that just goes away or whatever. It is a medical condition. And a lot of people don't understand that. especially if they haven't dealt with those issues like depression, anxiety, panic attack, stress, and all that, phobias and all that. So, and I have an article on my website that talks about how you can deal with people that are struggling with fear and anxiety and how to relate to them.
Yeah, that's really great. I mean, I think, first of all, reading books is really important, but I love that you suggested going to their next counseling session with them, because that is really important, I think, as well. If you're willing to go to a counseling session, I've been to counseling sessions with my 16-year-old. My 9-year-old has had counseling sessions as well, but they've all been like mental health checkups and not, I go in at the beginning and then I leave. So, but I've been in a session with my 16-year-old, and it's different to be able to say like, oh, how did therapy go? Versus going in and being part of that therapy and being part of that support system in that way. It's really a step that a lot of people don't take, and I wish more people really did.
And if you're a person struggling with anxiety and you're having trouble finding people who can't relate to you, I advise maybe join a support group and meet people who can relate to you. If you live with someone who gets in your case, try to explain your situation to them. If they're not willing to work with you, I would say try not to bring the situation to them, because if you argue with them and fight with them, it's just going to make things worse for you, and it's going to be more suffering for you. And if you're still having a hard time, get advice from a counselor or professional as to different techniques that you can deal with people who are giving you a hard time.
Yeah. It's an unfortunate reality that a lot of people can't go to their parent and talk about what's happening. And you're right. If you bring it to them and they're not receptive, you got to just kind of not bring it up anymore, which is so disheartening, I think. So 488 asked a question in chat, and 488, I need a little clarification. So you said, how do you tailor your message to various personalities and backgrounds? I'm assuming he's asking about like in a writing setting, when you were writing your book, how did you tailor your message to various personalities and backgrounds? But it could mean something different. So that's an assumption on my part. 488, feel free to correct me in chat if you had meant something different. But how did you tailor your message to various people in your book?
The way I look at it is fear, anxiety, mental health, illness. It doesn't discriminate whether you're young, old, or whatever. And everybody experiences anxiety, depression in a different way, but pretty much in the same process. And when you're young or old, maybe different circumstances and experience might change the situation. But anxiety is anxieties and fears and fears. And when I wrote my book, I wrote from experience what I dealt with and what everybody else goes through. I didn't really label into a young person to an older person, because their situations, their life experiences can make things a little different. But the way I address the situation is anxiety and fear in general. How does it affect the normal person? Because whether you're young or old, if you suffer depression, the process and what happens is the same. It's just your life experiences may be a little bit different. And I address the anxiety and depression that affects everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that because you offer so many different techniques and so many different ways of doing it, maybe that's kind of where the tailoring comes in. It's just that there's such a variety. You're sure to find something that works for you, right?
Yes.
And I know you mentioned this earlier, kind of at the beginning, but I want to ask a specific question about affordable mental health care. So I know that access to affordable mental health care and resources is a very common challenge for people. You talked about that already in your case. So how did your personal experiences with limited resources and access shape your approach to helping others? And what advice do you have for those who may be facing similar barriers to seeking help?
Okay, well, one of the experiences I had is that when I talked to different counselors, I would have a great counselor, and it went through, and everything went good. And then all of a sudden, there was a staff change, or they had to move, and I had to start over with a new counselor. That happened a lot, and that was very frustrating. And it took me a month or two to get to know a new counselor. And this happened like every other year or so, and sometimes every other couple of months. My local hospital had different programs. Unfortunately, it was a 5-month waiting list. I had to wait. And I was suffering at the time, and I signed up, and after 5 months, I still never got a call back.
Oh my gosh.
And fortunately, with the counseling, I had health insurance, but a lot of people don't have health insurance, and a lot of people might want to go to counseling, but they don't have the money. In those situations, what I recommend is, number one, talk to your primary care physician and get some advice as to what he can offer you in terms of low-cost programs in your area that you can get mental health advice without health insurance, because a lot of counseling sessions charge $150 an hour, which a lot of people can't afford, even with health insurance. So talk to your primary care physician. There's a lot of support groups in your area you can take advantage of. Contact your local hospital. Even if there's a waiting list, sign up anyway, because you never know when you might get a call. There's a lot of low-cost government programs in your area. There's also, you can go online. There's all the different help groups that can maybe give you advice, and you can take advantage of using Zoom and all that. All you need is an internet connection. There's also telemedicine. There's all kinds of help. You can also talk to your minister or clergyman at your church or whatever. They can give you different advice, insights. People that you trust maybe can give you ideas. There is help available, and some of the help is expensive and some of it's not. But you have to do the research. There is stuff out there. It just takes a little bit of work on your part. But if you follow those suggestions, you should be able to find something.
Yeah, so I want to also point out that there's a great therapy finder on yourrad.com, and they will help you work with what budget you do have, even if you don't have health insurance. And also on Psychology Today, there is a way to, in their therapist finder, there's a way to sort by low cost. So those are two tools online that you can, if you have some money but not a lot of money, you can kind of go and sort things that way. And then also, I know you said, talk to your clergyman or someone in your church. Even if you don't go to church, even if you don't believe in any religion whatsoever, people at churches tend to be, but just bear with me here, because people at churches want to help. They really do. And even if you don't go to their church, if you call them up and you say, look, I'm struggling, I need some resources, I need some information. Yeah, you might get a little bit of, oh, you should come to church and come visit. And you might get a little bit of a guilt trip along with it, but they'll provide you with those resources. They really do want to help. So whether you
my advice is you don't have to tell them that you don't go to church, you go to that church. They won't ask you unless you say something.
Yeah.
So don't bring it up. Just go there and just say that I need help. And if you have to just say, I attend a church here and there, and I was just thinking you could help me. You don't have to go into your personal story and all that if you feel uncomfortable. Just go there and just ask for help. And they'll be more than, they won't get into the questions like, well, do you go to church here? If they do, then that's probably not the right place for you.
Yeah,
because if you just go there and ask for help, they'll be willing to, regardless of your denomination, or regardless of if you go there or not, because they're not going to care or ask, because they just don't do that. And if they do ask, like I said, it's probably not a good place anyway to go to.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be your church, is what I'm trying to say. You don't have to go to church to get help from a church. So
exactly.
I just want to encourage people, you don't have to be religious to get help from a church. So that's another resource. A lot of people overlook that a lot of the time. Are there any self-exercises related to fear and anxiety that you think everyone could benefit from doing more, even if they don't have a personal experience with fear and anxiety?
Well, a lot of deep breath exercises help. Meditation, mindfulness, sitting down, taking deep breaths, mindfulness, focusing what's happening around you. There's a lot of different exercises that you can get on that can get instant relief like that.
Yeah. Deep breathing and meditation come up a lot on this show. It's one of those things that it comes up over and over, and there's a reason. It's helpful for so many different applications. So if you don't meditate, I don't usually meditate, but if you don't meditate, deep breathing, box breathing, whatever it is that can help you kind of just center yourself is really, really good. Oh, Unitarian churches can be a safe church if one is worried about being pushed to attend. Absolutely. Yes. And there's lots of non-denominational churches, and there's lots of options. Is there anything you do now in terms of self-care or other protective exercises to prevent fear and anxiety?
I do a lot of breath exercises, deep breathing, meditation, and I do a lot of exercises. Mm-hmm. I try to do that a lot, and I incorporate that in my daily routine.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, exercise is really important, even if you can just go for a walk for 10 minutes. That's really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to switch topics a little bit and talk about writing your book. So what was the process of writing your book like? And did you have any challenges that you encountered while you were writing it?
The challenges that I had was finding those techniques because a lot of times I didn't know, and that was really the hard part. Once I had the techniques in my notebook, it got a lot easier, and it was just a matter of refining those things because you can talk to 5, 6 different counselors, and they'll give you 4 or 5 different ideas and ways.
True.
And then, and when you're struggling, your question is, well, which one works? Which one doesn't work? Because some will, some won't. And when you talk to 4 or 5 different counselors, and they give you different answers, then you're stuck.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of times I would talk to different counselors, and they would say, well, I don't know, I can't really help you with that. And so basically, it was doing all that research. Once I had the techniques, the writing part was easy, and converting to a small book, it was just doing the research that was the hard part.
Yeah. Was this the first book you had written?
Yes.
Yeah. That's cool. Are you planning to write any more?
Maybe in the future, but not right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, just going based on all the research that you had to do for the first one, it might take a while to write a second one, right?
Yes. Yes.
I know that writing a book can be an opportunity for self-reflection and growth. So how did the process of writing the book, just the process of writing the book, contribute to your own personal growth and understanding of fear and anxiety?
Well, it made me focus more on my book instead of my worries and fears. So that was more of a distraction. So that was really helpful, and it was therapeutic, just writing things down rather than just running it through my mind. Because once you write it down, that helps a lot. And so it was therapeutic writing and just basically writing things down, and it's just like expressing my feelings. So that was really helpful.
Almost like journaling for,
yes.
Kind of getting it all out. Although my version of journaling is quite different from what most people's are, because when I journal, I have to write things down, and then on advice of my therapist, I have to tear them out of the journal and throw them away or rip them up or burn them. Because I'll go back and I'll just read it. I'll read and reread and read. And it's like an unhealthy level. So, but yeah, I mean, journaling can be really helpful. It sounds like that was kind of some of the similar benefits that you experienced with writing the book, which is really cool. How did you navigate and manage your own mental health while you were writing the book? Were there any specific strategies or support systems that you found helpful for writing the book and managing your own mental health?
Well, the techniques that I was writing, but I used in my own life, and then when a situation would happen and then those techniques didn't work, then I would write down more of my notes, what worked, what didn't work, and that's how I add more to my stuff. I would actually use the techniques, and sometimes they worked and sometimes they didn't. And then when they didn't work, I kind of looked back and figured out, well, what did I do wrong? And that just refined my techniques and refined my book so that when I wrote it, it was more of a learning experience because I didn't forget about it. And whenever I applied those techniques, I kind of wrote down my experiences. So that helped a lot.
Yeah. Did you work with a publisher or anything or
yes.
an editor?
Yes, I had a small-time publisher who helped me write the book.
Yeah, that's really cool. How did you go about finding that?
Basically, I just went online and emailed all different kinds of small and big publishers. A lot of the big ones were hard to get, so I focused on the smaller ones, and eventually I found somebody who was interested in my book. It took a lot of emails and a lot of research online to find somebody, but I eventually did.
Yeah. It sounds like you're very persistent.
Yes.
I think, even just doing the outreach for guests for this podcast, sometimes it can get a little discouraging if you get either no answer, which has been the experience a lot of the time for me. It's just like you just don't hear back, or a no a bunch of times in a row. Did you experience any of
yes.
that with? Yeah.
A lot of no's, a lot of rejection, but I was just persistent and kept on going.
Yeah, that's great. And now I guess you do the same thing whenever you write blog articles and that kind of thing, right? You just keep asking.
Yes, like you're sending out emails and contacting different websites and magazines.
What advice would you give aspiring writers? What steps should they take to prioritize their well-being while they pursue their creative goals?
Well, once you know what your creative goals are, and pursue them. But if anxiety and stress are interfering with that creative process, what I recommend is that you don't want to ignore those stress and anxieties, because if that gets the best of you, then your creative goals will go down the hill. So if you have to take a break from your creative goals, then that's probably the best thing, because you really want to stay on top of your fears and anxieties, because a lot of people, even celebrities, they pursue their passion and they neglect their mental health, and then one day the mental health just becomes so unbearable, and then you just fall apart. And you don't want that to happen. So never ignore your fears and anxieties, whether you're writing a book or whether your job, your career, or managing a family, whatever you do in your life, whenever fear, anxiety, and mental health start interfering with your lifestyle, regardless of what you do, you don't want to ignore that. And it's always good to stay on top of that. Get help, work with it. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of time every day. I mean, you try to do a little bit each day instead of trying to do everything all at once. And if you just pace yourself and you can't manage, but you just don't want to ignore your mental health, regardless of your situation.
Yeah, that's very widely applicable. I feel like, that it can be really tempting to say, well, I'm just going to push through and get through whatever it is, the next chapter, the next blog article, the next soccer game, the next whatever it is, kids activity, adult activity, anything, even for content creators, the next stream, the next podcast. And it's okay to prioritize your mental health instead. And
also delegate your responsibilities too, because a lot of people are really busy and don't have time. So you try to delegate if you can. Prioritize. Do what's important. The stuff that's not important you can put off another day. Just use common sense and try to make some time so that you can at least work with your anxieties and stresses, because if you don't do anything, that's when you can get in trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. I need to hire an assistant to just delegate stuff to.
Yeah.
I got to get to the point where I'm actually making money to have that happen, though.
Yes. I know what you mean.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to fail on the road to success. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you can't just be successful right off the bat. You got to just keep trying and give yourself the grace and space to fail a little bit sometimes. It's okay. Okay, well, we are at our magic moment here. Let me grab my wand. If you could wave this magic wand, I don't know why sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and eliminate one common opinion, misconception, or theory surrounding mental illness, disabilities, or talking about mental health, what would it be? Ooh.
I would say the myth that you shouldn't get help, that's just a myth. And there's nothing wrong with asking for help, because people may be saying, well, what will other people think? And you can't worry about what other people think. And there's nothing wrong with learning how to deal with your fears and anxieties. It's just like going to school or learning a new career or learning a new skill at school. It's the same thing as dealing with your fear and anxieties. You're just learning different ways to manage your fears and anxieties. And a lot of people are afraid, especially men, are afraid to ask for help because they may be perceived as being weak. And that's far from the truth, because mental health strikes everybody, and it's a medical issue. And you got to treat your mental health like your physical health. And if people do give you a hard time, then just don't tell them your business. That's all. If you decide to get help, you don't have to announce it to the whole world that I'm getting help. Just don't say anything. And people ask you questions, try to say at least as you can. And if they keep pressing you, just say that I'm having trouble. I'm really stressed out, and I'm having trouble dealing with my stresses. And people can relate to that, and they can understand that. You don't want to go into detail like saying, well, I have depression, and you don't have to go into all that detail. Just say I'm dealing with some stress and anxiety. I'm stressed out because of work, and I'm just looking for different ways to try to deal with it. And people won't think anything less of that. You just don't make a big deal out of it. Don't get into your private life, especially people at work, and just be careful what you say. And if people start becoming nosy, try to create boundaries, because there's always going to be somebody who's going to give you a hard time, and it's your life, and it's not theirs, and you're the one who's going to suffer. It's not a public relations event where you have to get everybody's approval in terms of getting help for your mental health. So think of yourself, put yourself first, and get the help, because those people who are giving you a hard time, they're not your friends if they're not willing to work with you and understand your situation.
That's true. And if anybody does give you a hard time and they're like, you need permission to get help for your mental health, tell them that I gave you permission. I'll back you up. MommaFoxFire said that I could do this.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's so funny because it just depends on your situation, right? Like I am an open book. I'm an open book at work. I'm an open book with my kids. I'm an open book on stream and everything, but I didn't used to be that way. I used to be very closed off. And I think the past probably 10 years have done a lot to make it where in some cases it is a lot easier to share some personal details. Like I just today on a work call, they asked how my weekend was. Like, man, I had a really shitty depression day on Saturday. And everybody they just get it because I am so open with things and everything. But 10 years ago, I would never have said that. I would have just said like, my weekend was fine. You know?
Well, even nowadays, it's still hard because if you're a teenager and you're asking for help, your friends will get in your case. If you're a man, people see you as weak. So, I mean, everybody's situation is different. So, I mean, if there are people around you that you can trust, that's great. But you just got to be cautious because the rule of thumb is there's always going to be one or two people who are going to go in your case. Don't assume that just because you're saying I'm dealing with mental health that everybody's going to understand, because not everybody's going to understand. Yeah. And there's always going to be one or two people who are going to give you a hard time. So you have to be aware of that. So before you start announcing to everybody what your business, you got to be careful and also have a plan that if someone does give you a hard time, what can I do about it? And have a plan and just be smart in how you address it.
Yeah, I'm really fortunate where I work that everybody is pretty understanding, pretty open about their own stuff. So it is different, but you have to know that you're in a safe space for that, right? So
yes,
for sure. What's the weirdest technique that you thought this will never work that it actually worked for you a little bit?
Well, the weirdest technique was probably just some of the counselors that I talked to I didn't really think were that great. And one time I asked for help and they basically said, well, Stanley, you got to kind of keep suffering until you give up, until you suffer. No, you can't suffer anymore, and then you get help. And I'm like, well, that's not going to help me. You know, I don't want to suffer to the point that I'm exhausted and I can't function the rest of my life. You know, I mean, and this person was a doctor, and some people just don't get it. Yeah. And you can't judge people, and sometimes people may surprise you. And some of the weird things, sometimes I would deal with people, and sometimes they would give me a hard time, and then they would say something really helpful, and that was surprising and all that. But basically, it was just sometimes you just got to be aware of who you're dealing with, even the professionals, because a lot of the doctors and psychologists, they went to school and they're well-versed in anxiety and fear, but a lot of them don't live it, and they really don't experience it. And they don't have the insights that somebody who's really struggling with. So, and that's where I come in. I'm not a professional, but I do have the insights, and I did talk with a lot of the professionals. So I offer both sides, the professional view and someone who actually struggled. And when you're dealing with fear and anxiety, you got to do the same. And there's nothing wrong with talking to other people, the different support groups people who've experienced situations just like yours where you can talk to. There's nothing wrong with that because you want to get a variety, because there are doctors and psychologists who just don't get it and because they never experienced it themselves. And I'm not saying they're not any good. I'm just saying that it's important to keep an open mind and just talk to people, different counselors, get second opinions, get third opinions if you have to, talk to your friends. Because it's just going to be one person who's going to be able to solve all your problems. It's a variety of things.
Yeah, that I was just talking about that. Yeah, I was on another person's podcast called "It's More Complicated Than You Think," and I was talking to Elaine on there, and we were talking about the fact that mental health advocates and people who are not mental health professionals but have this lived experience have such a different perspective from mental health professionals, and there's such a job for both, right? Like, mental health professionals are there for a reason. They are licenses for a reason. They get all the degrees for a reason. I don't have the degrees. I don't have the licenses. I'm not interested in getting those things either. And so what I bring, like what you're saying you bring, is just the lived experience with the things. And I can bring resources. I can point you to different stuff. I'm not affiliated with any of them. So it's really kind of like here are things that I've used that worked for me. I've been in this situation before. Here's what worked for me. And if some of that resonates with somebody, great. And it could be completely different from what they might get from a therapist. Now, that's not to say what I say is better, because it's not. And what you're saying is better, because it's not. It's just one of those things that at a time of need, when you are in a crisis or you are in a situation where you need some support, it's best to get all the support that you can. And that includes things like peer support and getting that kind of the research from other people that they've done when they've been in a similar situation. So I think your book is great. I think that there's a huge place for it. And, I love that you worked with mental health professionals to actually put it together and kind of review it and everything. I think that that's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So I am going to post your socials one more time, including your website, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. If anybody wants to connect with Stan on any of those, feel free to click through and do that. And then if you have any more questions, feel free to pop them in. And while we're waiting on that, Stan, I'll just open it up to you and say if there's anything that you would like to throw out there as far as resources or personal recommendations that we didn't cover or anything like that. I'll just open the floor and give it to you.
I think to always talk to your primary care physician, your doctor, local professionals in the area, medical and all that, and just do your homework. Go online, different support groups like NAMI.org. They have a lot of good support groups, and there's all kinds of different mental health associations that you can take advantage of. You go on Google and do searches in your area and things like that. But it really starts there. But you also have to realize that you have a problem, and you have to admit that you need help, and then seek that help. That's probably the main thing, and then go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Bitemark says, I want to say thank you so much for being here. It's always great to add new tools to the toolbox. I agree with that for sure. Oh,
thank you.
488 says, what kind of music do you play on those big speakers behind you?
I like soft music and mostly soft. I like the 80s, soft rock, things like that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I guess I just mostly, I can't even say the name of the robot, but I play everything through the Alexa. So I don't even have big speakers in my house. My kids were trying to convince me that I needed some for the living room for the TV, but I haven't sprung for that just yet. Well, Stan, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate you taking the time, and it was lovely to have you on.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Even Tacos Fall Apart as much as I did hosting it. Stan's journey from anxiety and fear to becoming an author and mental health advocate is truly inspiring. His wisdom on seeking help, practicing self-care, and the therapeutic power of writing is something we can all learn from. Remember, it's okay to acknowledge your fears and anxieties. You don't have to go through it alone. There are resources, there is support, and there are people who care about your well-being. If you found this episode valuable, please consider sharing it with someone who might benefit from today's insights. Together, we can spread awareness and support one another in our mental health journeys. And before we go, a big thank you to you, all of our listeners, for being a part of this incredible community. Your support truly means the world to me. If you are enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to leave a review and let me know your thoughts. Any engagement on your side of things in the form of clicking buttons to subscribe or like or typing out reviews on any platform goes a very, very long way to help keep things going here and reach more people. Stay tuned for more episodes filled with meaningful conversations, personal stories, and a sprinkle of humor. Until next time, remember, even tacos fall apart, but we can still enjoy the delicious messiness of life. Take care and be kind to yourself.